Hi, I'm really good at wasting my own goddamn time. So, I've spent, I think, about like a year working on this video. It took me like a good 6 months to get through this, and then like another 6 months to like sit down and actually write out my thoughts. Mostly because the thought of returning to this a number just filled me with so much dread for just for being alive. So I'm gonna be honest right now. Obviously I'm not going to be an objective reviewer of this book. I hate both this book and Ben Shapiro personally. I specifically picked up this book so I could shit on it. So just so you know, going into this, I'm not gonna be fair, and you can be mad about that. For those of you who don't know who Ben Shapiro is, I encourage you to never find out. But if you're morbidly curious, he is a very prominent, very smart, and very big boy, and a conservative commentator. Shapiro is mostly known for being completely logical.
Let's say, for the sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move?
Just one small problem! Sell their houses to who, Ben? Fucking Aquaman!
Unemotional.
Why don't you just say that you're on the left? Is this so hard for you? Why can't you just be honest?
Mr.
Seriously,
Shapiro,
it's a serious question.
I just
Really?
asked you a question.
And I asked you a question, you failed to answer a single one of mine. Frankly, I find this whole thing a waste of time. If you want to read the book and critique the book, why don't you read and critique the book? If you want to critique me, you can think whatever you want of me.
Why don't you
frankly,
just try and
I don't
answer
care.
the
I don't
questions?
frankly give a damn what you think of me since I've never heard of you.
And I've never heard of you until I briefed myself for this. But that's not the issue. You have a
Then
new
why the hell
book
are you
out,
interviewing
and
me, sir?
it's an interesting book. But my point is, your book claims that
Well, it'd be
society...
nice if you would quote it from time to time.
Your book is... Well, actually, I've done so several times, and I'm about to do so again, if you would let me just finish the question. Your book
frankly, I don't
claims
think
that
this, you know what?
society
Honestly,
is turning its
sir,
back on Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah, this,
What are
considering
those values?
considering
what are the values it's turning its back on?
I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer. So I think we're done here. I appreciate your time, sir.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and for showing that anger is not part of American political discourse.
Very rational during a debate. He's also an author of a couple of nonfiction books. I didn't look up any titles because I didn't care that much. But we're not going to talk about those. We're going to talk about his psychological political thriller, True Allegiance. So, before we go further in, on the off chance that Mr. Shapiro is watching this, first of all, fuck you, you're small and my dick is bigger. Second of all, like, this is like an earnest question, like, were you serious when you wrote this? Like, did you, like, sit down on your little booster seat and your little keyboard and, like, clack this out and think, like, yes, this is good. This is possibly the next great American novel. Because if this is, like, a cash grab, like, I get it, you know? Like, I understand where you're coming from. But, like, you put your name on it. You went to Harvard. Like, you're literate. You know how to read. And so I'm sure you've picked up, like, a book. A fiction book in your life, and you know what makes for a good story and a bad story. And did you think this was good? Like, did you really think this was... I genuinely want to know. If I had one wish in the world, it would be to sit down with Mr. Ben Shapiro and go through this page by page, reading to him all of my favorite lines, and then asking, so what was the motivation behind that one? I wish I could have a Ben Shapiro annotated copy of this book, and I say that with my whole heart. Because I know you're going to be tempted to read this, because I was, I'm going to go ahead and lay out the whole plot for you right now so you don't have to. So True Allegiance starts off with a short prologue right in the middle of the action as the George Washington Bridge is being blown up. I almost put the book down immediately when on page 3 I had to read the lines, "She opened her mouth to scream and realized that she was already screaming so hard no sound was emerging." But I kept going because... So after that cheap hook, we have part 1, Before. So we know something big is going to happen but we're gonna start before all of that. The main protagonist that we follow in True Allegiance is, not Brett Kavanaugh. I literally wrote Brett Kavanaugh in my script. Brett Hawthorne is his name. We follow Brett Hawthorne, a young general stationed in Afghanistan. President Prescott, a black Democrat who is running the country into the ground and is completely fictional and not based on any real political figure at all. Soledad Ramirez, an angry old woman who is currently refusing to leave her property that was confiscated by a goddamn socialist in Congress and the Environmental Protection Agency. And Lavon Williams, a black man living in Detroit, building an empire based off of dealing crack cocaine. So the first chapter follows our hero, Brett, and we know he's our hero because the chapter goes into how super sexy and cool and important he is. Hawthorne was a bear of a man, 6'3" in his bare feet and 215 pounds in his underwear with a gray and blonde crew cut and a face carved of granite, but he had plenty of smile lines. He just didn't like showing those to people unless he knew them. We also know that Brett's gonna be our main character because of how much time is dedicated to his backstory. So Brett grew up in the poor, industrial, and heavily black side of Chicago, where he's bullied for being white. So then we get into a really great scene where Brett is attacked by the school bully, a gentleman named Yard, and then he's saved by Derek, his token black friend, who stops this ass beating that's in progress by singing Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder's Ebony and Ivory, which is a real scene that Ben wrote down here for us to read. Now remember Derek, because he might show up again later. So after high school, Brett goes to the Citadel, which he didn't pick because it's a known military school. He actually picked it because South Carolina seems gothic and romantic compared to the south side of Chicago. I guess so. It was while attending college that Brett met his wife, Ellen, that he paid to marry him, pretty much. He flashed what he hoped was his most charming smile. I've been asked by cadets before, and I'll be asked by cadets again, she shot back without hesitation. And if you'll wipe that grin that looks like you're eating tacks and manure off your face, and if you buy one of these here pictures, I'll think about it. The smile disappeared. His hand flashed into his wallet. He took out a $20 bill, fingered it, then handed it over, pointing at a watercolor Palomino-lined road along a shore. I'll take that one. She handed it over. So how about it? She raised an eyebrow in mockery. No, I think I'll pass. He felt the frustration. But I just bought the picture! I'm not that cheap of a date, she laughed. This time, the musicality of it pierced him. So maybe his way with words didn't win Ellen, but his persistence did, which is how you get a woman. By the time he bought his 5th picture, she agreed to a walk. By the 10th, they were going steady. 2 years later, they were married. So I know Ben's, like, married, right? Like, he has a wife or whatever, which personally I don't buy. But is this how he did it? Like, is he paying her? Is that why she stays with him? Is he paying her? Oh my god. So then, despite being described as a kid without discipline, Brett graduates at the top of his class in the Citadel and is quickly promoted to first lieutenant. When Ellen gets pregnant, though, she and Brett kind of talk and they decide once they have the baby, he's gonna leave the military. Of course, that doesn't happen because Ellen has a miscarriage, and then Brett decides if there's no baby keeping him around, he's gonna stay in the military. So Brett, of course, quickly rises through the military ranks because he's super sexy and cool and badass. Brett becomes a public figure and the purest example of American military combined with American caring, which is what the military is known for, being really caring. Then Mark Prescott got elected president and everything just went bananas. So then Prescott promotes Brett to general and makes a promise to pull the troops out of Afghanistan, which Brett thinks is a bad idea. And then Brett is accused of sleeping with this reporter named Diana Kelly, which isn't true, of course. Prescott dismisses Brett, but of course, before that can happen, he and the ambassador of Afghanistan, a Mr. Beauregard Felkoff, they were attacked by the Taliban. And then that's when the story starts. After like 22 pages of backstory, now we're getting there. So next we meet President Prescott. With both the economy and his reputation in danger, Prescott creates what he calls the Work Freedom Program. So basically what this program does, it's raising taxes on corporations while offering tax incentives to corporations that hire more employees. For those who couldn't get a job, the government would hire workers for any industry that was already nationalized or heavily regulated, which is, I guess, what Ben thinks is socialism. Prescott, of course, is told that they don't have any money for something like that, but he doesn't care, so he announces it to the public anyway. And then after Prescott's chapter, we get to meet Soledad. So Soledad is this little old rancher whose land is being repossessed because an endangered species of fish happens to live in the river that she uses. Of course, she refuses to leave, and so the SWAT team is deployed. And then, after that, she wakes up and then she finds that her house is surrounded by a militia of rednecks that are fighting, like, on her side. After that chapter, we get one that briefly introduces Levon and then shows a scene of a white police officer shooting a little black boy because he thought his toy gun was a real gun. And then we jump to Ellen, Brett's wife, who's in Texas dealing with some issues on the border. So then Brett gets kidnapped, finding out that Ambassador Beauregard Felkadoff, or whatever the fuck his name is, was actually giving away military secrets. The president's arguing with the governor of Texas, Bubba Davis, about the border, and then that's when he gets news about Brett. America is told to either withdraw the military occupation or that the general was going to be killed. After that, we get to meet more of Ellen and Governor Bubba Davis, who are dealing with immigrants crossing the border. And then we jump back to California, where we see more of the standoff going on between Soledad and the SWAT team. So a SWAT person, right? Like, what are they called? A SWAT, I don't know. SWAT guy named Aiden goes to help her escape, but he doesn't do a very good job because people still see her, like, trying to leave and there's, like, shootout and everything. And then we go to Levon, where we find out that the shooting, the tragic shooting that had just happened, he orchestrated it to start, like, a race war, I guess, which is what Ben wants to say about the Black Lives Matter movement. And then we get another character point of view. This one, it's a boy in Iran named Mohammed. So Mohammed's just this chill young dude sitting in a cafe waiting for his buddy to show up so they can plot, like, the downfall of America, and that's where I get to read this treasure. He just wished Andre would show up already. Even if this was a safe spot, he was getting sick of listening to the Western-style sinful music blaring over the speakers. What, he asked himself, does it mean to hit me baby one more time? Which, so after that, we jump to part 2, the collapse. So Brett's still kidnapped, and the cartoonishly evil villain monologues a little bit, but it's all gonna be okay because while Brett was being broadcasted on TV, he blinked a secret message that he's hoping that somebody's gonna catch. And they do, and they see that it's him sending him his coordinates and to order, like, an airstrike so the terrorist guy can blow up now. But the president doesn't want to do that. So he sends a rescue team to go get him instead. And then Brett's like, this isn't over. This is what he wanted. And Prescott's like, whatever, dude. And then Ellen and Brett reunite. And then Brett gives her some information. And Ellen gets a call about the bridge blowing up. And the president wants a National Guard there. But they need the National Guard at the border because the goddamn Mexicans are trying to get in still. Then we go back to Soledad. And they're all the way in North Dakota. And then they turn on the TV and then they see that there's a crowd of protesters that are calling for the death of the cop that we talked about earlier. Which is really great because now the storylines are, like, all connecting, like we're starting to see it. So the group kind of talks and they decide that now they're an active terrorist organization, they're going to move against the government, which is good. So we see that Levon has started to become kind of a big figure in the protests along with some other guy. But the other guy wants to, like, settle before Levon's kind of done. And so the cop is found innocent, and now he's mad, and they're all getting ready. Now we're back to Brett, and he's on the scene of the explosion. And then he meets up with a buddy, Derek. You remember him? I didn't at first, but now he's back. And now he's Brett's, like, token Muslim friend, which shows that he's not racist or Islamophobic. He just doesn't like the bad ones. And so Brett's like, I'm looking for a terrorist. And then Derek, who's now going by Hassan's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna find him. And so we switch to President Prescott, who's, like, getting himself ready for this kick-ass speech that he's gonna make to comfort the nation after a tragedy. Let me go ahead and read you this. A voice cried out from the back of the crowd. You did this! Prescott was momentarily startled. Then he began. In times of grief, we do not walk alone. We walk together, yes, but we walk holding the hands of a higher power, a power that believes in a higher justice. You did this, Mr. President, the voice again. A murmur carried through the crowd. The voice continued, and suddenly a few of the cameras swung around from facing Prescott toward the lone protester. It was a woman, overweight, wearing faded jeans and a t-shirt with holes in it, her hair chopped short. "You did this, Mr. President! My husband is at the bottom of the river because of you, Mr. President!" I like that she's still keeping the respectful Mr. in it, though. Prescott tried to seize back the momentum and kept speaking into the sky. "A power that believes in America, just as we believe in him, and who will guide us through difficult times and that try us. Mr. President, you owe us all answers!" Now all the cameras were turning to face the woman. Members of the Secret Service closed in around her, seeing her as a potential threat. Prescott could already see how it would play out on the evening news. Crying victim hustled away as the President of the United States looked on. It wouldn't go down that way. That was no iconic moment. This woman was about to undermine the nation's unity in order to place blame not on the terrorists who had committed the atrocity, but on the government that had tried to stop it. Prescott could feel his stomach clenched in anger. Instead, he stopped, looked directly at the woman, held up his hands to the Secret Service and said, "Stop. Let her speak. We're all grieving." One of the Secret Servicemen had his hand on the woman's upper arm by this point. She took it off roughly. Then she started pushing her way to the front of the crowd, shoving members of the press aside. Prescott waited for her, seething quietly. When she got up to the front, she climbed up on the makeshift stage. Prescott could see the hatred in her eyes, could feel the rage. His hands were shaking, and one of them was a photo. She held it up the picture of her husband. Gray mustache, heavyset, 60s. The microphone picked up her words. "Have you seen my husband, Mr. President?" He shook his head dumbly. "I didn't think so. He drives that bridge every single day to get to his job. I'm sure he was on his way when it collapsed. You promised, Mr. President, to keep us safe. I know because I voted for you." Oh my God, she was a Democrat. You promised that bringing our troops home would change everything, that ending the wars would make us safer here at home. And now I'm asking," she choked back tears, "if we're really safe. How can we be really safe after this? My husband won't ever come home again, probably, because you didn't keep us safe. He served his country in Vietnam, which was a very just war, and came back to this country, and all he asked was that our country honor his services. How can you keep us safe?" She stared at him, eyes glowering. And suddenly, he saw a way forward. He leaned forward, let a tear roll down his cheek, and hugged her. She tried to pull away initially. He held her tighter. That's like gotta be really awkward to watch on stage though, right? Finally, he let her sob against his chest, the tension going out of her body. The cameras flashed around him. The moment. Time stood still. This was the image he'd been seeking ever since the election. Compassionate, caring, strong. Now he waved for a couple Secret Service agents to come forward and usher her from the stage. They moved quickly within the moments. He was on stage, alone again, the sun reflecting brightly off the river. He spoke slowly, deliberately. The moment. I'm gonna stop reading after that because, like, that's a lot. Okay, so now we're back in El Paso, though, and Bubba didn't send the National Guard because Bubba needs them in Texas. Then we're back to Soledad's perspective, and we see that she and her gang are gonna go to Detroit because, oh my God, guess what? Aiden, he was friends with that cop. So they go to save him, and they disguise themselves as white racists in order to go unnoticed. Which, of course, things still kind of go wrong, and there's like another shootout and everything. So now Levon's mad, though, because they killed off the guy who was kind of like calling for things to come to an end anyways, but he can't anymore because he's dead. And so now they're gonna go after the officer, but oh my gosh, wait, no. Aiden dies, which is super sad because we were really attached to him, like, as a character. So then Levon starts a riot, and then we get to part 3. The beginning of the end. So Brett gets a call from Hassan that he has something, and they meet up. So Brett goes to the address, and he asks about this guy that he's looking for, this Arab guy, and he's like, "No man, I don't know, why are you singing out Arabs?" And so now Brett's mad because he looks like he's racist and Islamophobic, and then there's like killing going on in Detroit, and then there's the riot, and like the plot threads are starting to connect. So Levon makes a deal with some city officials, and they're like trying to work things out, but we don't know how it's gonna go yet. And then we're back to Ellen, and we caught some guys on the border, and things aren't looking good, so Ellen goes to New York instead of Bubba, and she has, like, this emotional phone call with Brett. She's like, "Aha, babe, like, something bad's gonna happen here." And we don't know what it's gonna be yet, though, because then we move to Soledad's perspective, and like they're in Tennessee now, and I think here is actually where Aiden dies. Then we're back to Levon, and he's meeting the president now, and they work out a kind of deal that Levon's allowed to organize like a small militia in Detroit, and he's like running the city, and so that's where that plot thread ends. So we go back to Brett, who's meeting Hassan, and Hassan's like, I know who it is. And so then Brett goes to meet Muhammad, who's the guy like he's been looking for. And he tells him something, but we don't know what it's gonna be yet. And we get this like super dramatic like phone call with Brett and Ellen. He's like, don't go to New York, but she's already on her way to New York. And she's like looking for Brett, and she finds his son's apartment, and she goes in and she's like, oh no, he's dead. Which again is so sad because we were super attached to his character and we loved him so dearly. Okay, and so now they're meeting with the president. The president's like super pissed off because like Brett's been like going off on his own and like digging up all this information. He's making America look racist. And he's like, you gotta stop this or I'm gonna like ruin your life. And then Ellen's like, no, he's not gonna stop. And Brett's like, babe, chill. And now we get to a chapter that actually isn't named after a character. It's titled The End of the Beginning. So Mark Prescott is doing everything he can to like make everything right again and make everything go away, but ooh, we see that Soledad's in the crowd. He's about to make a big speech. She's got a plan. Which of course is to assassinate the president, but she misses. And so then Ellen then gets onto a plane with the president that's attacked by terrorists. So now the president's dead, and Ellen's dead, and America starts to fall, and there's like this scarily open ending about like Soledad and Brett meeting up at the end and kind of going off to save America, which like makes me think that there's gonna be a sequel, and I don't know if I want to read that. So that's the book though. So since this book is basically a reflection of Ben Shapiro's own politics, of course I dislike that aspect of it. I'm not here to talk about his politics though. If you're interested in a more cohesive takedown of that than what I'm able to provide, I'll link some videos in the description. I'm here to talk about his writing though, because this is genuinely the worst piece of writing I've ever like sat down and read. I'm gonna look through and find some quotes for you that are winners. The SWAT team didn't expect the first time she brought them cookies. Nobody brings a SWAT team cookies. Levon's smile never faltered. It's Shakespeare, he said. It means you'll learn to trust me. Crawford laughed, loudly this time. Then he looked at Levon curiously. Quoting dead honkies, he twinkled. You might be useful yet. It's okay. The sexy blonde with the short skirt seemed to turn on that point. Breathily, she asked, and what will justice look like? Her eyelashes fluttered. That shit was magic, Levon knew. He learned it at university, too. White co-eds majoring in journalism were a cinch. Just drag them off their civilized perch and let them experience life outside their self-proclaimed white privilege, and they let you know that you'd be doing them a big favor. It really reads like a 13-year-old boy's, like, military fantasy. The characters were at best two-dimensional, with the most developed being Brett, even though all he kind of goes through is like some torture porn and no real like development. His supposed best friend was there as a token minority, and his wife's personality was basically I love my husband. This book was very filled with a lot of would-be emotional moments if you actually cared about the characters, and it was also filled with a lot of racial stereotypes, which like I didn't really expect anything different, to be honest. The pacing was so bad that even like the exciting scenes were boring to read. I mean, we got like 22 pages of like a character's backstory. Everything was very one note and very slow. There was a lot of examples of telling and not showing. Nothing was emotional, nothing was suspenseful. It was all just bad. Even if you want to read this as a joke, because like my plot wasn't enough for you, I guess, don't waste your time. Like you're not gonna have fun. I thought I was gonna have fun. I didn't. And yeah, this is so far one of the worst books I've ever read. With any other kind of book, I think I would say no ill will towards the author, but this one I'm gonna make a special case for and say, yes, send ill will towards this author. I don't like him very much. And really, that's gonna do it for me. Thanks for sitting through this with me, because it was rough. Go ahead and like if you liked it, or dislike if you didn't. That's okay, you're entitled to your opinion. Leave a comment engaging with me and about, you know, be like, hey Charles, that book sounded awful. You're so brave for reading it. And I'll be like, thank you, I know. Subscribe if you want to see more content. I upload semi-often. And link in my description for my Twitter if you want to follow me there. That'd be great. And yeah, that's gonna be it. Alright, bye, I love you.